everybody, and welcome. We are going to be talking about the Watchmen season finale. I'm Clint Gage with Joshua Yehl.
Hello.
Here is your spoiler warning. If you haven't seen the season finale of Watchmen, which is what, episode 8? They did 8 of these? 9 of these
Nine.
things.
Like the
of these
9-panel
things.
grid.
My goodness. If you haven't seen it yet, get out now. Thank you. So, the season is wrapped up. What'd you think about it overall?
I thought this was such a satisfying conclusion to my favorite show of the year, possibly the best superhero show I've ever seen, and just a stunning achievement on all fronts. Super pleased. What about you?
Agreed. In general, I think stuck the landing. I don't think the finale was the best episode of the season, which is fine, but overall, the season was really great. But let's dive in specifically to the season finale here. There's a couple of things that we really liked, a couple of things that maybe went wrong a little bit, I think. But the things that we liked, first of all, Lady Trieu. The way that her arc through the whole season kind of came to fruition in the season finale, I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah, I liked how they planted all the seeds there to that she was the daughter of Ozymandias, right. But that never even crossed my mind. I just thought she was just another sort of super intelligent character, to populate the world of Watchmen. But yeah, to get the origin story of her mother, beyond breaking in to Ozzy's private stash.
How did she put it? Private stash. How did she put it? She injected herself with some of your legacy.
Yes. That's a new one on me.
Yeah, that's a euphemism I have not heard before.
Yeah,
which I'm going to use it, frankly.
Yeah, and that is a new just supervillain origin story. Because she is essentially the supervillain of the show. And I thought it was so great that she wasn't, your typical mustache twirling foe. She was more of a legacy character, right, in that she's sort of this Ozymandias 2.0, because most other characters in the show are a legacy character, like Silk Spectre to Night Owl to not Dr. Manhattan. I guess the comedian didn't. He just kind of carried on from the Minutemen to the Watchmen. Rorschach, we saw his masks were appropriated by the 7th Cavalry. But Ozymandias, he's like one of a kind, or is he?
Apparently not.
It's a great reveal that, there is someone who's sort of on his level and can do his sort of years-long planning to try and save the world, in air quotes.
Right. And the D that we saw that he had spelled out in some of the bodies on Europa, what daughter was not even on my list of guesses as to what that might mean. So that was a turn that actually really got me. I thought they played that hand really well. Other things. So her Lady Trieu's plot is unfolding. We reveal that she is actually the one that wants to take over Dr. Manhattan's powers, which I thought was great. She's such an upgrade over the 7th Cavalry and the Senator Keene being the main bad, which they weren't bad to begin with. Like, they were good bads. But having Lady Trieu be like the big bad was I thought a great turn that they played really well. But that all led up to Dr. Manhattan's death scene, which this scene in particular was the one that I realized this show's got me. Because here we have Dr. Manhattan, who is a godlike being. I can't remember the exact, created by a mishap, like the most comic book character in the entire thing, right?
Freak science accident.
Freak science accident creates this godlike being. He sees time as all at once and blah, blah, blah. And so for him to be like, teleported to a spot and then exploded by more technology, and for that bizarre circumstance that is completely unrealistic, like, to be dealt with as relatably and grounded as it was, and it really got me in the feels. Like, I was like, oh, well, this show's wonderful. Like, for this bizarre set of circumstances to feel real, like crushingly real and sad, was incredible.
Yeah, a sentence I never thought I would think or say out loud is like, oh yeah, when the shiny blue guy turned into the normal guy for just a second, and they have the moment with the wife, and that it was really sad and great.
Right.
Because that's not a real sentence, and nobody talks like that. That's why.
Sure, that's
I would
part
never
of the
say
reason,
that.
but the content of the sentence is also another reason. So yeah, that death scene I thought was really moving.
That was an incredible, like, emotional punch, as you said, like, to the episode that really brings everything home. Because that last episode, episode 8, you really told that love story between those two characters, and that really got me at the end. And so then they really just queued that up so they could use it against me and my feelings in the finale, and it worked really well.
Yeah, which I thought episode 8 was actually the best episode of the season. To then land that punch in episode 9 was great. But that again led to the very last shot, which is another thing I think was pretty cool about this the very last shot of this season.
I thought I just had a big grin on my face. I'm like, oh my God, is she going to do it or is she not going to? And there's also like a slight like blue tint that came.
It started to glow a little blue, right?
And you were like, oh, is that just because, the camera's picking up the color of the water?
Yeah.
Or is she turning into Dr. Manhattan? It's obviously ambiguous. We may never know.
Right. So she finds that egg that's unbroken in the carton. She thinks about the egg that he talked about a couple episodes ago. Hopefully, if there is a season 2, it's not just her dealing with salmonella from drinking a raw egg or something. But as she's walking over to the pool, like it's such a drawn out sequence. And I knew that they were going to end with that close up of the foot just barely touching, and then they were going to cut away, and we weren't going to know because that's Lindelof, right? But even like fully expecting that to happen and still seeing it play out, I thought it was absolutely the right way to end the season.
Yeah. So one thing I'm a little iffy on how much I love it because while it was a great moment, the more I've thought about it, I'm a little unsure on what they want the implication of that to be.
Right.
Because when you think of other great ambiguous endings, you think of like Inception with the spinning top. It really would change the entire movie if, he was still in the Inception or not. Whereas this, I'm like, okay, what is the big change if she does have the powers?
Sure.
Just the fact that there is yet another Dr. Manhattan or an Anhattan.
Anhattan Nabar,
yeah. In the series, but the series essentially ended on a happy note, like there's a happy ending. So it's not like she needs the powers to fix something, and nor have we ever heard Angela talk about what she would do with power like that.
Right.
So we have no kind of hint into the future to what the world would be like should she get those powers.
Yeah, I do agree that there's nothing thematically going on in the show that needs that amount of ambiguity on the end, right? I mean, you talk about Inception. I mean, Joker earlier this year had the same kind of thing where it's like the implication of like, well, what was real and what wasn't. Like, that's not something that they're playing with at the end of this. I do think there's something interesting about whether or not Manhattan will live on. At the idea of Dr. Manhattan anyway will live on as somebody else, and he could transfer his powers and stuff like that because. For Dr. Manhattan to be such a large figure over Watchmen and everybody freaking out about him being on Mars and when's he going to come back and he didn't do enough and blah, blah, blah. The one line that they did deal with this idea on, I think, is Ozymandias mentioned, like, as he was rushing to throw the frozen squids down on the things, like, anybody who endeavors to be a god needs to be stopped at all costs. I was paraphrasing. It was something along those lines. So, like, the idea that Angela didn't want the powers. She was never working to get the powers to then sort of inherit the powers. I think is kind of an interesting idea to end the season on.
Right. She never wanted that power, and that she's good-hearted,
right.
And should she be the person who does get those powers, it would, hopefully she would do something. She would do the right thing with them,
right, which I think is part of the happy ending you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
I think like Dr. Manhattan's powers are safe with Angela, if indeed they are with anybody.
Yeah, but I do love that the ending even has us having this debate because the end of the original Watchmen graphic novel, of course, has that Rorschach's journal with the entire events,
right.
Ozzy's plan written inside of it gets dropped off at the tabloid. So there's that implication that, oh, wow, the secret is going to get out there, and you're left on this sort of ambiguous note to how it's all going to play out. If you take this series as canon, people chalked it up to just some crackpot theory and didn't believe it. But I do like, again, that Lindelof stayed true to the spirit of Watchmen and gave us this really, really tantalizing, cliffhanger in a way.
Totally. So let's move on to some of the things that maybe we didn't think landed quite so well. one of the things that bothered me about this episode was that two very important characters didn't really get anything to do in the last episode, right? I'm talking, and it's Laurie Blake and Looking Glass. I think both of them particularly got a little shortchanged by this because the trapdoor scene from a couple of episodes where the remote wouldn't work and Laurie gets captured, like that was a hilarious scene.
It was great.
Where the remote just like, God damn it, what the but she was literally tied to a chair for the last 3 episodes of the show, and she was basically just kind of along for the ride. And to be such a big part of the series up into the trapdoor spot felt a little disappointing that she didn't have more to do in the end. Same thing with Looking Glass. He literally disappeared for 2 episodes, shows back up, wearing the 7th Cavalry mask, kind of undercover there, and he shows back up in time to essentially not do anything. Like he got away with the disc that's proof of Ozymandias's plan, but essentially he doesn't factor into the ending at all, which was kind of a bummer.
Right. They were just there as a way to, I guess, tie up the Ozymandias thread and, have like somebody's got to, bring him to justice.
Sure.
And so that didn't really feel as satisfying because, these characters had entire episodes built around them.
And two of my favorite people in the whole show.
Yeah.
I love both of them.
When those episodes happened, it felt like Laurie Blake, that was her like joining the show because we had the 2 episodes without her. Then she came in and just owned it. Yeah. And it was just such a great performance. And she really made a mark on the characters we had come to know on Angela's life. So I thought this is her merging with the narrative and she'll now be a part of it. And no, you're right. Yeah, she kind of got sidelined. And and same thing with Looking Glass. After his amazing episode, we just don't see him until the end. Until they do have a purpose, but it just doesn't feel like we got some great, rich thematic material to follow up on their standalone episodes.
Yeah, and the bummer about Looking Glass too is he stood in for like the impact that Ozymandias' plan that the giant squid had on people, like in a very real way, like getting like the support groups and the effect that it had on the survivors of the giant squid attack. To not follow up on that thread at all, I think was Looking Glass as a character was really cool, but then the idea that he represented that then didn't get sort of wrapped up, like that I feel like he should have had a bigger moment at the end when he actually to meet Ozymandias. And to know that this is the guy that has caused him so much pain over the years, and then to just not hit him with a wrench and then grin about it at the end was just, I was like, I wanted more for him.
Right. It almost, we could have gotten a whole nother episode worth of material to sort of flesh that out, but
that's the trick, right? Everything gets a whole nother episode. All of a sudden it's 14 episodes and would be fine.
But I appreciate just getting 9 episodes. With each episode has its purpose, and you're right. Some things did kind of fall by the wayside. One character that you didn't mention that I thought was also given the shaft was Lube Man. Lube Man comes in. It's one of the craziest scenes of the show, and they never follow up on it. There is a theory. If you read the companion website for the Watchmen show, PDpedia, it's sort of vaguely hinted that PD might be Lube Man because he's tall and lanky, and he might have been watching Angela
on orders from Laurie.
Keeping track of her.
I always assumed it was Pete.
Right, but they just never brought it up again. How can you do something as crazy as Lube Man?
Yeah, just like spraying himself down and sliding into a sewer, like it was,
and not bring him up again.
Totally agree. Now I'm furious, actually. Another thing about the ending, this is a thing that Lady Trieu sort of pointed out in the flashback scene, the 2008 scene that we get when she sees that Ozymandias is still dumping squids on the world. But the idea of it's sort of Ozymandias' greatest hits, right? How did she put it? She's like, it's the same trick, or the old trick, or whatever. To then have her plan thwarted by the same old trick feels appropriate on some level, but also it's like, well, no, that is the same trick.
So what has you most upset about this? I
think the fact that they sort of point out that it's an old trick and then use the same old trick anyway. It feels like, I don't know. It feels like maybe there wasn't as a creative solution to the problem, and so they actually just went with the old trick that was already there for them in a weird way.
I will counter you on this because I know you don't like that, but I actually like the sort of twist on the fact that his transporting squid thing is what kind of like destroyed the world and saved it in air quotes in the original graphic novel. But in this story, it stops the world from being destroyed and literally saves it.
That's fair. That's fair.
Like the squids have now come full circle and we're a force for good.
The squids have now come full circle. To me, there was something strange about how they leaned on it as a gimmick. Like I said, I mean, half of me thinks it is an appropriate way to do it, and I totally get the point about it being the squids coming full circle and it being sort of an homage or honoring the spirit of the original comic book. But there's also just something about like the fact that I don't know, they just so quickly went to like, I'll dump squids on him, which felt strange, and it felt a little demeaning to Ozymandias too, even though he has slowly gone insane for the past 9 years or however long he's been gone. It felt easy. It felt like shorthand to me.
Okay, I feel your frustration, but also Lady Trieu looking at her hand with a golf ball sized hole in it from like an ice squid pellet. And she's like in shock, like, oh dear God.
Yeah, no, that was pretty gnarly. And then I did like the symmetry too of Angela getting called on the phone that was normally used to call Dr. Manhattan. I thought that was kind of a fun way to like get out of there, with that device. But yeah, there was just something strange about Squid showing back up for me. Kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Happy to be wrong.
Not in calamari. Okay, it's fine.
Yeah. So, in talking about everything that happened in this series finale, what is I keep calling it a series finale, which
we're doing that.
I'm going to stop doing it. So, in talking about things that happen in the season finale, we got to talk about where it's going to go next.
If it will go anywhere.
If it will go anywhere at all. There's been some wishy-washy kind of word on whether or not there's going to be a season 2.
Right. Lindelof, when asked about season 2, was a little ambiguous, saying that he didn't really plan on having a season 2. He said he wanted season 1 to be a standalone thing all by itself that didn't end on some thing that directly led into a season 2, because there are no plans for that as of yet. He said, should he ever have a compelling idea to do a season 2, he would do it, but that idea has not come to him yet. And he was very adamant that he do 9 episodes that reflect like the 9-panel grid of the comic, and that it be beginning, middle, and end. All that said, this show has gotten a very great response. I haven't looked at the ratings.
We'll see if HBO can convince him to come up with an idea quicker than maybe he would have on his own.
Yes, a producer had given an interview where they said, again, no concrete plans are in place, but, they're in the business of making TV if it's a hit show, and there's a great reason to keep that story going. I think they will.
Do you want a season 2?
Here's the thing. I'm actually 100% completely fine if we don't get a season 2, which is weird to say something about a show that I love this much. Right. Easily the best show of the year. But I think one thing I like about it is that it is a standalone product, beginning, middle, and end. It is so good that it actually makes the graphic novel better, which is crazy to think, because the graphic novel is considered the best comic book ever made, and they made a TV show sequel to it that enriched the material, and both are they just complement each other so well. I'm like stunned. I don't know if history could repeat itself. Can lightning strike twice? Right. I don't even want to find out. I don't need a season 2. What about you?
I'm right there with you. I mean, frankly, the only sort of thread that needs or that could be picked up right now is Lube Man. Excuse me. The 2 threads that only need to be picked up right now, Lube Man for sure, and what Angela does with Manhattan's powers if she indeed does have Dr. Manhattan's powers. The only other option, which is a drum that I always beat, is anthologizing it. Like, is there a completely different story to tell in the world of the Watchmen? Whether or not it's Night Owl in prison, or like, there's some other ground to cover. They played with a lot of their greatest hits in this one, obviously with Dr. Manhattan and Ozymandias and Silk Spectre and like all, like you were mentioning earlier, the legacy characters, most of them show up here. But if there's the more compelling part of the show were the new characters that got introduced, I thought. So building a whole other story that's got nothing to do with this one, I think would be interesting.
I think having this is me just dreaming something up. I think having our two characters that kind of got shafted in the end, Laurie Blake and Mirror Guy, having a buddy cop. They clearly don't like each other, but they work well together. Doing an anthology, like what happens next for them. A great time to introduce Owlman, bring him in. He's the one major character that people were asking for, but he just didn't fit into the story. And Lindelof said he's just not part of the story. Obviously, we got a little peek at Archie at the end, which I thought was great. Just a little cameo appearance there, and sitting in the garage at Karnak. So I think it would be great to follow and see what follow those characters and see what's going on with them. Also, we got a really cool sort of like hint at what Laurie Blake has been up to since she was Silk Spectre 2, and now when she was the comedian, which is like a female comedian. At some point, she decided to pick up her father's legacy, which is the last thing I expected from her because he's a tool bag.
So very polite way of putting it.
And the show loves Watchmen loves to use like flashbacks and play with time and stuff. So to get a look at that part of her life and see maybe how that informs what she's doing while hanging out with Mirror Guy and solving crimes and stuff, I think would be great.
Right, a Laurie Blake and Mirror Guy buddy cop because Pete is obviously Lube Man, we would get Lube Man in that too, presumably. Yeah. So that's probably the way to go.
Yeah. All our problems on this list,
they're gone.
Solved.
Literally all of them. Well, that is what we thought of the first season finale of Watchmen. Let us know what you think about it in the comment section down below. And as well, what do you want out of a season 2? If you want a season 2 at all, what would you like to see out of it? Obviously, the correct answer is Lube Man, but I'm okay reading incorrect answers as well. Let us hear about it. And as always, subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch. We'll see you next time.